Hello everyone and welcome back to another single button build. Today we're going to talk about the Arcane Mage, which has been very requested and is actually the second most played spec when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons, when we actually look at keys that has been completed. And this build has been very interesting to build because it's quite hard to get it worked with the single button system when you just use like a standard meta build. For example, most people, they run with, for example, shifting power, which we're not going to be doing. And a lot of people is going to say, no, you cannot play without shifting power. But we have to, because the single button keeps using it, and then randomly, in nowhere, you're just going to be standing and casting the spell and not be doing damage for like 4 seconds. So we had to basically remove that talent. We also had to use a macro. So for example, we're using cast no channeling single button assistant, because else it kept like canceling arcane missiles. So it needed a few modifications. We changed a little bit in the talents, not much from the meta builds, but we did change a few things. But yeah, overall, I think this build is great. I think a lot of people who, usually when people say they play Arcane Mage, they always say you need like a PhD to play an Arcane Mage, because it's like a really hard spec to play. But with this build now we have made, and with the single button assistant, everyone is going to be able to play Arcane Mages. And I know a lot of Arcane Mages is probably going to hate it, because they like, they feel kind of special that it's only them who knows how to play it. But with the single button assistant, everyone will be able now to play it with this build. Of course, the standard Arcane Mages is probably still going to be making more damage than us. That's not the point. We're not trying to outperform them, if you know what I mean. The single button assistant builds is more for like casual gamers who just want to have a good time and be able to see what's going to happen when you're fighting a boss, instead of looking at your rotation all the time. But yeah. Beside of that, in this video, we're going to talk about the intro, which we just did. We're going to talk about the stats. What stats should you be going for with this single button build? We're going to be talking about the talents I have picked, the rotation. Basically, I'm going to show you how you open up your rotation and how you basically play through the entire fight. And then we're going to end with a gameplay. So basically, it's going to be like a 10-minute video, like a 10 minutes of me doing a dungeon, where I'm just basically showing you how I would play it and telling you how easy it is. So that was the kind of short intro. Let's jump to the stats. Alright, so when it comes to stats, of course, as always, usually when you play a mage, we always go with intellect as the first thing. What I mean with that is basically I would always recommend you go with the highest eye level. I know a lot of people, they usually they go down a bit in eye level if they can just get the best stat for you. But since we are playing with the single button assistant and it's a bit more like a casual playstyle, I would highly recommend just go with first for the highest eye level. Always highest eye level. Then, of course, whenever you get an item that has the same eye level as the other item you just had, we, of course, are going to look at stats for the secondary stats in the item. So if you played the meta and you didn't use the single button assistant, you would normally go with versatility. Versatility is nice because it's for Arcane Mages, it's basically flat out increasing the damage in rotation. It's making you a bit more tankier also, because you take less damage, and Arcane Mages is a class spec that needs to get a bit closer than other casters. And it also basically makes our prismatic barrier stronger as well. So basically the shield we have that we can keep up all the time is also getting stronger, because it can flat out take like a lot of damage. Like you can see it basically takes 1 million damage. But the more versatility you have, the less damage the shield also takes, which means it can last up longer. So it helps us to become a bit more tankier caster, kind of like a battle mage, if you would like to call it that. But at the same time, it also just increases all the damage we have. So it's a very nice trade-off, because, fire mages, they basically have a spell that saves you whenever you're about to die. Frost have a lot of CC, and Arcane Mages, we have a shield and shimmer. That's basically it. So that's why normally meta builds, they would go with versatility first. But when it comes to the single button rotation, as always, we want haste first. Basically, haste is reducing the global cooldown on your spell. So whenever you cast a spell, it has like this global cooldown that spins around on your spells that you have to wait for is getting ready. when we play with the single button assistant, it punishes it with a 25% longer global cooldown. That's why haste is very nice, because it basically reduces our global cooldown in general, which of course would also reduce the global cooldown on both the punishment and normally. Also, of course, haste makes all our spells cast faster. It helps us to basically get all our procs faster. It helps us to generate more arcane charges faster, because everything just goes faster. So that's why that haste is just like a really, really great thing for Arcane Mages to have, because everything just goes faster, the rotations go faster, we channel faster, we cast arcane missiles faster. The global cooldown, because there's a lot of spells we want to use at the same time. The switch between the spells goes faster. So haste is really great. So basically, again, if you have the chance to get an item that has higher eye level, try and get haste or as versatility. I would say instead of like having that crocodile mouth going to it, we could probably have like a slash and saying haste and versatility. Both are really great. So go with it, whatever you want. After that, we have mastery. So basically, mastery is usually more fitted into meta builds where you have a burn phase, where you have a burn phase. But the problem is we still have a burn phase with the single button build, but it doesn't care about the burn phase. It doesn't know what a burn phase is. It just uses the spells it wants. So basically, you can see our mastery. Increase your mana regeneration rate and maximum mana by 23%. Arcane charges increase the damage of Arcane Blast by an additional 21%, and Arcane Barrage by 14%. So basically, the more charges you have, it increases the damage of Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage. And also, it increases all other arcane damage by 19%. So overall, it's a nice passive trait to have, but most people say this is like really more into like the burning phase again, which the single button rotation doesn't really care about. And even the meta players, they don't really prioritize mastery. So yeah, don't think too much about mastery. Beside of that, we have crit as the worst one. Normally other specs, they have some bonuses with crit. For example, when you have spells that always crit, or they can utilize more crit, even if you like the more crit, the more damage you get. It even like makes some of your crit abilities deal more damage based on how much crit you have. But Arcane Mages doesn't really get the biggest benefits from crits. Of course, it helps all would make your spell do double damage, but it's nothing compared to what haste and versatility can do for an Arcane Mage. So again, just a big summarize it up. We like haste because it makes the entire single button rotation way more smooth. We like versatility because it helps us to deal more damage and become a bit more tankier, since we do have to go close to deal damage, especially when we have to use Arcane Explosion getting close up. Mastery is fine. It basically gives a bit more mana regeneration, a bit more damage, and crit is like bleh. So yeah, so that's the stats. I hope that was explained well. So let's get to the talents. Basically, we are running with Sun Fury. It's the meta. It does usually most damage. It is really like every Arcane Mage you find out there is using Sun Fury. As well, why I am picking Sun Fury is because it is like a very big, strong, passive build. Like it has so many passives that go directly into the single button assistant. So, and that's also what we want for the single button assistant. So it's just like very lucky that Sun Fury is also the meta, because it really empowers the single button assistant, which is why we are doing that. We're going to talk about the Mage talent trees, the Sun Fury talent tree, and the Arcane talent tree. But let's start with the Mage because that's the shortest one. So basically, over in the Mage here, we have Prismatic Barrier, which is just giving you a shield. Try to keep it up all the time. It also reduces magic damage taken and also the duration of harmful magic effects against up to reduced by 40%. So basically, it's kind of like, it's just like a shield you want all the time. Like you just want it on all the time. Technically, we could macro it into the single button assistant, so it will keep using it. That would actually be quite interesting to test. But yeah, we could technically maybe do that. We could test that in the rotation part. But yeah, that shield, you just want to have it up all the freaking time. Just keep it up all the time. It does magic for you, if you know what I mean. We also have Incanter's Flow. It's a passive one that we have had for so many expansions. Basically, it keeps building up to 10% more damage, then it goes down to 2% damage, goes up to 10% damage, goes down to 2% damage. It cycles every 10 seconds. Very powerful. We also have Overflowing Energy, which basically your spell critical strike damage is increased by 10. And whenever you like fail to crit, it keeps like increasing your crit up to additional 10%. And whenever you like actually crit, it will like restart. So it's kind of like what Fire Mages had in the old days, that every time they don't crit, it keeps giving them more crit. And whenever you crit, it actually goes down again and you kind of like restart. It just helps you to finally land that crit. We also have Ice Block, which of course is our best, strongest defensive. And with inside Ice Block, we have also taken that it has 1 minute less cooldown. And we have also taken Ice Cold, which basically removes the effect from it, so you cannot move. Now you can actually move while having Ice Block on. You can also cast spells, which is super cool, but instead of that, it basically blocks 100% of the damage you would take. It blocks only 70% of the damage you normally take. And Ice Block would normally be there for like 10 seconds, but now we are getting it only for 6 seconds. Also, we have taken Cryo Freeze. Meta doesn't play with Cryo Freeze. They don't, for some reason, want this self-healing, which makes sense because they do raid and dungeons where they have healers. I know a lot of people likes these builds for also leveling and also doing solo delves, so that's why I like this one here. So basically, when you're inside Ice Block, which is now Ice Cold, you are healed by 50% of your maximum health, which is super nice. So when you actually go into the Ice Cold and take 70% less damage, you're also healed for basically healed 50% of your life. And since Ice Cold is on shorter time than Ice Block, it basically also heals you faster. So it's quite nice. You can pop up your Ice Cold, you could use some like, Frost Nova, and then basically get healed by 50%, which is quite nice. Also, we have Tempest Barrier, so every time you use like a Shimmer here, you can see we get a shield that basically absorbs, what is it, like 6% of your maximum health, so quite nice. If you use Shimmer again, you can see here that it doesn't stack, it doesn't like go on top of each other, so don't like double Shimmer if possible. Try to use one Shimmer, get the shield off, and then Shimmer again. At least it didn't stack here when we actually used it twice. We also have Alter Time, which is basically, it's kind of like going back in time. You use it, and then after 10 seconds, you're going back in time. So you can see here, we're kind of like saving the slot we are. Then you can either wait till it goes off, you can use it again, and it basically alters in time. What it does, technically, alters the fabric of time, returning you to the current location and health when cast a second time or after 10 seconds. Effect negated by affected negated by long distance or death, which basically means if you're too far away or you die, it doesn't do anything. So basically, when you use it and the boss hits you, let's say the tank faced the boss the wrong direction, the boss now attacks you, and you use the spell here, it basically goes back to before the boss hit you, and you will now have like all the HP again. So you can see here, for example, we're using it now. Go on here. Then if I got hit or something like that, I could use it again to basically go back in that time, and I would get my HP back. It's just a nice little thing. We also have the Master of Time, which basically reduces the cooldown of Elder Time by 10 seconds. Elder Time resets the cooldown of Blink Shimmer when you return to your original location, which is quite nice. We also have Shimmer. So Shimmer is one of the... See, the thing is, like, a lot of other specs like Fire Mages and Frost Mages, they can like move while casting abilities, like a lot of their abilities. We cannot as Arcane Mages. We're a bit more like stationary, which is why we also have Shimmer. So of course they can also take Shimmer, but like Shimmer is a really great one because you can actually cast a spell and use Shimmer at the same time. So you, like if someone, like if the boss is about to throw something on you, you don't have to stop casting. You can keep casting and using Shimmer at the same time. I will of course talk about this when we go back to rotation, but it's just such a great thing that you can actually blink around while casting your abilities. Beside of that, we don't have too much interesting thing in here. We have, of course, Inspired Intellect, which gives you, so when you actually use your when you use your Arcane Intellect here, you can see that it now gives 9% of intellect instead of the standard 3%, which is quite nice. So basically, instead of 9% more, 3% intellect, you get 9%, which is nice. We also have Mass Barrier, which is super nice because everyone gonna love you as a mage when you throw Mass Barrier. Basically, you're throwing your prismatic shield on everyone in your group. So everyone basically gets like a million HP shield, which is quite nice. And you will also see for fun on the healing meter, if you play with a damage meter, that you suddenly goes to the top because everyone has your shield on. And the healer will be like, why is the mage top healing? So yeah, but that's basically what we have here on the left side, which I think is like noticeably to talk about. Yeah, because the rest of the things we have here we will go to when we come into the rotation. We also have the Sun Fury here in the middle. The Sun Fury, normally I skip this talent here in the middle because, you know, it's basically just passives. But Sun Fury actually has a lot of like things that happen in the background. Remember, people usually say when you play Arcane Mage, you need to have a PhD in it. And that's why, because we have all these weird effects going on in the background. So Sun Fury, basically the first spell we have is every 6 times you cast Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage, you conjure a Spellfire Saphir. But while you're out of combat, you will slowly conjure a Spellfire Saphir over time. So basically you can see I have these Saphirs over my head. Each of them gives you 1% spell, so you can see the last effect here. Each of these give you 1% of spell damage. So you can see here, spell damage is increased by 5%, which is quite nice. I mean, 5% more spell damage. What's not to like? Then, of course, you probably think, okay, but like, are they going to disappear? What's going to happen with them? That is the thing that's going to happen down here. So first of all, we have Mana Cascade. Casting Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage grant you 0.5 haste for 10 seconds and stacks up to 10 times. Multiple instance overlap. So basically every time you cast Arcane Blast, Arcane Barrage, you get 0.5 haste, which is quite nice. But remember this one here, because we're going to get something else later on, which is going to improve this one here. Here comes another one. So basically here, when you cast Arcane Surge, you summon an Arcane Phoenix to aid you in battle. If you don't know what that is, we have a spell here called Arcane Surge, there's one here, and it basically now also summons a Phoenix. Your Arcane Phoenix aids you for the duration of your Arcane Surge, casting random Arcane and Fire spells. So very nice, you get like a really cool Phoenix next to you, big Phoenix that basically casts spells together with you. For some reason, the internet has called this Phoenix for Allah or something like that, A-L-A-R. I don't know why, but it's just kind of like that what Mages is calling it for some reason. Beside of that, we have Burden of Power. So conjuring a spell Saphir, basically this Saphir up here, whenever we conjure it, so not when it comes passively out of combat, but when you actually create it from casting 6 Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage. Conjuring a Spellfire Saphir increase the damage of your next Arcane Blast by 20% or Arcane Barrage by 20%. Okay, so keep in mind, don't forget this one here. We now have Spell Saphirs that comes every time we cast 6 spells of either Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage. Now when it happens, it will increase the damage of our next Arcane Blast or Barrage by 20%. Yes, but consuming Burden of Power, which is this one here, Burden of Power, this is the Burden of Power. Burden of Power is the one that is taking that 20% damage. When we consume it, consuming Burden of Power causes your next Arcane Barrage to deal 20% increased damage. But, consuming Burden of Power causes your next Arcane Barrage to deal 20% increased damage and grant 4 Arcane charges, which is these charges up here in the left corner. So basically we get full 4 charges and call down a storm of 4 meteors or meteorites at your target. So basically when you have used 6 spells, you get this like Burden of Power. When you then use Burden of Power on either your Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage, you then also get 4 charges of Arcane charges, and also you call down meteors on your target. So when you just spam the single body rotation, you just spamming it, just keep spamming it, you will see that meteors will just randomly spawn down on your target all the time. And if I hadn't told you this, you would be like, why is there coming meteors? I don't understand. But now you do. So you can thank me later. Beside of that, we have Rondumancy. Spellfire Saphir can now stack up to 5 times. So basically, instead of like lesser times, it can now stack up to 5 times, which is why you can see here we have 5 of them. Also, your Prismatic Barrier now grants 5% avoidance while active and 3% leech for 5 seconds when it breaks or expires. So you can see here, because I have my shield on now, I will passively get 5% avoidance, reduce damage taken from area effects attack. And whenever I reapply this shield, because when you reapply the shield, it technically removes it and reapply a new one, or when I get damage and it get removes, we get 3% leech. So you can see now I reapply it and I get 3% leech for 5 seconds, which is nice. I mean, it basically gives you a little bit self-healing. We also run with Arcane Bombardment, it's called Sunfury Execution. Basically, we have an execution spell here called Arcane Bombardment. Arcane Barrage deals an additional 130% damage against target below 35% health. But without this one here, Sunfire Execution, it would only deal 100% more damage against targets below 35% health. But with this one here, instead of 100, it now deals 130. So it's basically just giving us a really cool execution. So, you know, whenever like you have a boss you're fighting and he gets under 35% health or mobs, we deal a lot of damage with Arcane Barrage. Then to finish off in the middle here, so we have this one here which is quite interesting called Lesson in Debilitation. Your Arcane Phoenix will spell steal when it's summoned and when it expires. So basically when we summon the Arcane Phoenix from Arcane Surge, it spell steal when it's summoned and when it expires. I see a lot of people, I just noticed that from some guides, and I met another mage, they don't like this one here because they say that it can technically spell steal from mobs that you haven't even pulled. Like imagine you're fighting here in the middle, like imagine you're fighting here and you're fighting some mobs over here. But then you use Arcane Surge and it summons this Phoenix, and then some people claim there's a bug that it basically starts spell stealing from mobs over here or over here. And suddenly you are the fault of a wipe because you pulled a lot of mobs. If you notice this happens, then of course go away from it. That's not very stable. Then basically go to Gravity Lapse, which is just going to enhance our Supernova, basically making them take damage when they fly up and take damage when they fly down. Nothing big, like it's really like a low damage, so nothing big. I just really like the idea of this one here, and all the meta builds I found also uses this one here, most of them. But again, people will talk about this bug here where it just like pulls random mobs for you. So I mean, test it and see if it does it. If it does, then go away from it. We also have Codex of the Sunstrider. This one here is super important, because when we go to the next one here, this will make sense. So over its duration, your Arcane Phoenix will consume each of your Spellfire Saphirs to cast an exceptional spell. Upon consuming a Spellfire Saphir, your Arcane Phoenix will grant you Lingering Embers, which basically increases your spell damage by 1%. So basically, I'm trying to explain this. Spellfire Saphirs, which is the 5 Saphirs I have over my head, is increasing, each of these Saphirs is increasing my spell damage by 1%. My Phoenix is going to eat these Saphirs, but now my Phoenix is going to increase my spell damage by 1%. Very nice. So I don't lose anything. I still keep my spell damage, and technically it could like stack up even higher now because it keeps like eating them. And of course, when it disappears after 15 seconds, all of this is going to be lost and you have to go back to your spell Saphirs. But there's a very deeper meaning with this, because the last one here, while under the effect of a casted Arcane Surge, so basically when you have used Arcane Surge and for the next 15 seconds, you gain twice as many stacks of Mana Cascade, which was this one here, which gave you haste. So normally, you know, casting Arcane Blaze, Arcane Barrage grants you a 0.5 haste for 10 seconds, stacks up to 10 times. So basically now, it gives you you gain twice mana stacks of mana cascade. So basically you get a lot of more haste now, a lot of more haste, which we like with the single button build. But when your Arcane Phoenix expires, it empowers you, granting Arcane Soul for 2 seconds, plus an additional 1 second for each exceptional spell it had cast. And if you remember, it casts 1 exceptional spell for every time you have a Spellfire Sphere. So the more Spellfire Spheres you're going to be generating from your Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage, the more exceptional spells your Phoenix is going to be casting, the longer you're going to have your Arcane Soul on. So that really makes sense, right? The more like it casts, the more you cast, the more exceptional spells it's casting, the longer time you're going to have Arcane Soul on. And now you might be asking, what is Arcane Soul and what does it do? So basically Arcane Soul, when you have it on you, Arcane Barrage grant clear casting and generate 4 arcane charges. So every time when you have Arcane Soul on, Arcane Barrages grant clear casting, so you can actually use your Arcane Missiles or do double damage with your Arcane Explosion and generate 4 arcane charges. So imagine you basically use Arcane, where do we have it? Arcane, where the hell is it? Arcane Barrage, here you go. Instant cast, no cooldown, just deals damage. But now, because we have this one on, you can basically cast Arcane Barrage and it will like give you 4 charges for stacks, and you can just like keep casting it. So basically while you have this one on, you could technically, and the single button actually does it, it just keeps casting Arcane Barrage because it keeps like giving you 4 charges, which increases the damage, and also it increases the more target it actually hits. We'll come back to that from over here. But it gives you like this bursting window where you could just keep spamming Arcane Barrages. But don't worry, we're using the single button assistant, so we don't have to think about that. It will automatically handle it. Each cast of Arcane Barrage increases the damage of Arcane Barrage. So basically, every time you cast Arcane Barrage, it increases the damage of Arcane Barrage by 15 up to 150. So you can see what it does. It really wants you to spam Arcane Barrage when this happens, when you have Arcane Soul on, to basically increase its damage and blah, 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 blah. So you can see all this really makes sense to have together. And don't worry, the single button assistant is handling all this for us automatically. It will use Arcane Barrage whenever this effect is on. So, very, very cool. So that was basically the Sun Fury tree. Now we're going to go over the Arcane tree in the right side. So now we come to the Arcane part. And usually when I do my guides and talk about in the right side, I just talk about some highlighted talents. But with Arcane, since it's such a advanced spec and has so many things that like works together with each other, we kind of have to go through all of them. So you can of course skip through and go to the rotation part if you just want to see this in action. But if you really want to nerd down and learn everything in here, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna explain every single of them so that you understand what is happening while you smash that single button rotation. First of all, we of course are learning Arcane Missiles. Arcane Missiles can only be used when you have clear casting. You might be asking now, what is clear casting? Clear casting is basically this passive you have here. Casting an arcane spell has an 8% chance to grant access to an arcane missile or make your next arcane explosion free. So basically every time you cast an arcane spell, which is luckily what we have in here, you have 8% chance to actually get clear casting, which can either enable us to use arcane missiles or get a free arcane explosion, or it is called the explosion. There we go, that one. So yeah, because in old days with arcane missiles, for example, if you play classic, you could just keep spamming it. That's not how it is here. We need these clear castings to actually be able to cast arcane missiles. Then of course we have improved clear casting. Clear casting can now stack up to 2 additional times, which basically means your clear casting can actually have 3 stacks. So while casting other spells, you can actually get 3 stacks of clear casting, and then technically you can use free arcane explosions, or you can use free. When I say free, I mean the number free and not things is free. But basically you can use free arcane missiles or free arcane explosions. Beside of that, we have never precisioned. This one is important because we're going to come back to it. We have other spells that is basically, we have other talents down here, which is going into this one here. But consuming a clear casting increases damage of your next 2 Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage. So basically, when we get clear cast, we use clear cast, it increases damage of your next Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage by 30%. Very nice. So again, all this is automatically handled by the single button rotation, so you don't have to worry about that. It just automatically is handled. So everything is good. Don't have to worry about that. Beside of that, we have concentrated power. Arcane missiles channel 20% faster. So basically your Arcane missiles is now going to be cast faster, so you don't have to worry about like they are casting slow. Clear casting makes Arcane Explosion echo for 40% or for damage. So basically what that means is that when you are having clear casting on, because you can always use Arcane Explosion, like you can always just use it. But when you use it with clear casting, where you get a free Arcane Explosion, it now also echo for 40% damage. What I mean with echo is it double damage. So basically it will do like double Arcane Explosion, 1 normal damage and 1 that is 40% of the damage. So basically double. So yeah. So technically you could be spamming Arcane Explosion and hope that it's going to give you a clear casting and it would actually do double Arcane Explosion. So pretty cool. Then beside of that, we have application. Arcane missiles now fire 3 additional missiles. So normally, you know, it will fire, I don't know, 5 missiles, whatever, how many missiles it is over those 2.3 seconds. But now it fires 3 additional missiles. Basically, it will just do more damage. Then we have Arcane Cleave. For each Arcane charge, so basically the Arcane charges you have here in the top left corner, for each Arcane charge you have, Arcane Barrage hits 1 additional nearby target for 40% damage. Which means if you use Arcane Barrage with 4 charges, it basically is going to hit up to 4 additional targets, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's going to help you in, for example, mythic dungeons, when you actually want to like strike multiple targets. We also have Arcane Familiar. This one here, I had to, like, I understand it, but I was like, when I first tested Arcane Mage, I was like, why do I have this little bird with me? Who the hell are you? But now it makes sense, because this one here is the bird. So casting Arcane Intellect, summon a familiar that attacks your enemies and increase your maximum mana by 10%. So basically we have this little bird that attacks together with us. It's not like a pet, it's just like passive attacks. And also it gives us 10% more mana, which is nice for an Arcane Mage. Keep in mind, if some other mages in your group cast Arcane Intellect, you still have to use Arcane Intellect, because you can see here when I take it off and I use Arcane Intellect, I get it as like a buff. So it's not enough that other mages that use Arcane Intellect, you always have to use Arcane Intellect, even if there is another mage. Just so you know. Tip of the day. Then we have Arcane Surge, which is our starting burst rotation spell. Basically, it uses all. It basically uses all your mana. It deals, the more mana you have and you use on it, it deals more damage. It basically explodes the target. And that's not the main reason why we use it. The main reason why we use it is for the passive it gives you. For the next 15 seconds, your mana regeneration is increased by 425%, which makes sense because it basically just used all our mana. So how am I supposed to throw spells now? Don't worry, it gives you all the mana back. But the one why we like this one here is because the spell damage is increased by 35%. Yes. So basically, analyze your enemy target and nearby enemies up for 400k or 500k damage. And of course, it deals less damage beyond 5 targets. It also gives you a clear casting, by the way, so you can use, like, you know, Arcane missiles right after this. But basically, deals a lot of damage to up to 5 targets, and after 5 targets less, give you clear casting, and then basically it gives you all the mana back, and it gives you 35% more spell damage, which is insane, because that's what you're going to be using for your burst, your opener. And no, this one is not inside the single button rotation, so you've got to be casting it before you start spamming in an opener. Which is very different, for example, from Frost Death Knight, because every single cooldown is inside the single button rotation for Frost Death Knight. But for Arcane Mages, we actually have quite a lot of cooldowns that we need to use outside of the single button rotation. So yeah, just letting you know. Then we also have intuition, however you say it, casting a damaging spell has a 5% chance to make your next Arcane Barrage deal 50% increased damage and generate 4 arcane charges. This is super cool because every time you're casting a damage spell, there's a 5% chance that your next Arcane Barrage deal 50% more damage and gives you 4 arcane charges. Again, you don't have to think about this, it all happens automatically inside the single button rotation. But all these things I'm reading up here right now just gives you an idea that when you press that single button ability, tons of stuff is going to happen. All these procs, all these buffs, there's so many things happening when you press that button. So for people who plays Arcane Mage without the single button rotation, I have huge respect for them because it literally requires a PhD in Arcane Mages. It's like there needs to be like schools teaching people how to play Arcane Mage. But of course, with the single button assistant, we don't have to think about all that. We could just we're skipping the school and going directly into battle, if you know what I mean. So yeah. Beside of that, we have Arcane Tempo. Consuming an Arcane Charge, increase your haste by 2% for 12 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. Which is quite nice because we are consuming a lot of Arcane Charges again, which is the one up here. So every time you consume them, we get more haste, and it can go up to 5 times. So yeah, you're basically going to have this on you all the time. We also have Slipstream. Arcane Missiles and Evocation can now be channeled while moving, which is super cool. So now if you're using Arcane Missiles or you're using Evocation, you can actually move while using it. So, quite nice. Very nice. Then we have Arcane Barrage deals 12% increased damage per target it hits beyond the first. So, quite nice. You know, when, for example, this one here, the more arcane charges it has, the more target it can attack. The more target it attacks, the more damage it deals. Pretty cool. Then we have Impetus. Arcane Blast has a 10% chance to generate an additional arcane charge. If you were to gain an arcane charge while at maximum charge, you gain 10% arcane damage for 10 seconds. So basically every time you use Arcane Blast, which is our normal filler, which always generates an arcane charge, it has a 10% chance to give you an additional one. But in case you actually you already had 4, it just basically gives you 10% more arcane damage for 10 seconds. Quite cool. Like there's a lot of damage. We also have Touch of the Magi, which is basically inside your in your opener. When you open up and start damaging, we have Touch of the Magi we're using. It's inside a single button assistant, so you don't have to think about it. Basically what happens is that first of all, it generates 4 arcane charges. So like 4 charges, boom. Then all the damage you're gonna do for the next 12 seconds, 25% of that is going to be exploding after the 12 seconds. So now your main question probably is going to be, okay, does that mean the 25% damage is not going to be used? Well, it basically every time I do damage deals 75% damage only, and then the last 25 is going to come after 12 seconds? No, you still deal 100% damage to the target, but instead 25% on top of it is going to be saved and explode after. So and then exploding for the amount of arcane damage to the target and reduce damage to all any target. So basically it kind of like explodes and deal damage. But I was also thinking, oh no, is it actually like taking damage away? It doesn't. It basically just like keeps like it basically saves it. Like it takes like 25% of all the damage you've taken and basically reapplies it again and explodes. So pretty cool. It also has an upgrade. So basically, without this one here, it was only 20, but now with this one here, it's 25%. So, which is nice, but you don't have to think about this one here. It's inside your rotation, like it's inside a single button rotation, so you never have to think about it. It automatically uses. I will come back to talk about the opener when we go to the rotation part of the video. Then we also have Dematerialize, if I say it correctly. It's quite cool. It's kind of like your damage over time. It's always nice to have some spells that is damage over time in case you're gonna move or something like that. This is your damage over time. So spells empowered by Never Precision causes their target to suffer an additional 8% of the damage over 6 seconds. Now you're probably going to ask, what was Never Precision? Never Precision was this one up here, that basically every time you consume a clear cast, it increases the damage of your next arcane, of the next 2 Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage. So basically your next 2 Arcane Blast, if you use that, or Arcane Barrage, 8% of that damage is now going to be spread, is now going to be doing additional 8% damage, which is going to be spread over 6 seconds. So you will see a lot of like debuffs, curses, whatever this is, on the enemy targets. And when you have your damage meter on, it will go crazy because it keeps like showing that these effects is going on. So it's quite cool to get some kind of like damage over time as an Arcane Mage. Besides that, we have Consortium's Bauble, reduces Arcane Blast mana cost by 5% and increases damage by 8. Very nice. Clear casting has a 5% increased chance to proc. We like that because, of course, we like to have more clear cast, because it does basically damage over time. It increases the damage overall. So just having 5% more chance to actually happen is very nice. We also have Evocation. Evocation is basically increasing your mana regeneration by 1500 for 2.7 seconds. And also it gives you clear casting, which is very nice. But the main reason why people have picked this one here is because it gives you basically 7 stacks of 2% more intellect. So I think it was like 14, like you can see here. When you use Evocation here, you get this stack here, which basically gives you intellect up to 14%. So that's why we use Evocation every time we're about to pull. Every time before the tank is about to pull, you use Evocation, and then you just get 14% increase in intellect, which is going to increase your damage by a lot. So that's why it's just really nice. So always use it before pull. Like you can, they usually say like use it 4 seconds before pull, because when it's done casting after 2.7 seconds, that's when the countdown of the buff actually starts. So yeah, Evocation, we got Evocation, but only to get that 14% additional intellect, which is very nice. Then we also have this one here, Energy Reconstitution. Damage from Demoralize has a small chance, so basically this one here, all the damage over time, all the damage over time we're having, which we just talked about, damage from Demoralize has a small chance to summon an Arcane Explosion at its target location at 50% effectiveness. Arcane Explosions summoned from Energy Reconstitution do not generate Arcane charges. So basically, every time our damage over time deals damage, it has a chance to freaking summon an Arcane Explosion, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so you will see that sometimes when they have these damage over time, they just also randomly explode. I actually don't know if they actually have a visual of it or not. I can't remember if you can actually see them exploding. But yeah, keep it there. We are almost done. Almost done. We also have Arcane Debilation. Damaging a target with Arcane Missiles increases damage they take from Arcane Missiles, Arcane Barrage, and Arcane Blast by 1% for 6 seconds. So basically, yeah, Arcane Missiles is basically doing so the target damage you do to the target is increased. So, which is just another nice one. Then we also have this one here, Arcane Charges now increase the damage of your Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage by an additional 30%. So basically, when you have your charges up here, your Arcane Charges up here, when you have your Arcane Charges, they now also increase the damage of your Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage by an additional 30%. So that of course means when you have charges up here, you deal more damage. Very nice. We also have Aether Attunement. Every free time you consume clear casting, you gain Aether Attunement, which is really overpowered, because then your next Arcane Missiles deal 100% increased damage to your primary target and fires up to 4 nearby enemies, dealing 50% increased damage. This is important to notice because sometimes you see you're using Arcane Missiles and it only attacks one target, and sometimes it attacks like up to 4 people. So this kind of explains it. Every time you have basically consumed free clear casting, then your next Arcane Missiles is going crazy, insane. Then we also have Enlightened. Arcane damage dealt is increased based upon your current mana, up to 6% at full mana. So basically, you are doing 6% more arcane damage based on how much mana you have. So arcane damage dealt is increased based on your current mana, up to 6% at full mana. So when you have 0 mana, you do 0% extra damage. When you have full mana, you have 6% more damage. And then of course you can imagine, like when you're on the half of mana, you have 3% more damage, and so on, so on, so on. But Mana regen is increased based on your current mana up to 20% when you're out of mana. So that of course means the lower you are in mana, the more mana regen you also have. It kind of like goes both ways, if you see what I mean. To that, we have each time Arcane Missile hits an enemy, the damage of your next Arcane Barrage is increased by 5%, and this effect stacks up to 20 times. So basically, each time your Arcane Missile hits an enemy, and you know when you attack someone with Arcane Missile, it keeps like attacking with a lot of missiles. Basically, that a lot of those missiles, they can stack up to 20 and increase your Arcane Barrage by a lot. And Arcane Barrage is this one here. So Arcane Missile now increases the damage of Arcane Barrage. Very nice. Only 3 more talents that we're done and we can finally go to the rotation. So we already talked about this one here. It's basically your execute, like a warrior execute, which is improved by this one here by 30%. But basically when you're attacking like a target that is below 35% health, your Arcane Barrage deals 130% additional damage against the target. So very nice. We also have Lay Sight, which basically never precision damage bonus is increased by 10, which is the one we have up here. So basically, every time you consume a clear casting, the damage of your next 2 Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage is increased by 30, but 10% of that comes from this one here. And very lastly, we have Lay Drinker. Consuming clear casting has a 40% chance to make your next Arcane Blast echo, repeating its damage at 70% effectiveness to the primary target and up to 4 nearby targets, nearby enemies. So basically, when you consume clear casting, it has a 40% chance to make your next Arcane Blast, which is the normal filler we use, Arcane Blast. So when we use, for example, Arcane Missiles or Arcane Explosion on a clear cast, there's a 40% chance that our next Arcane Blast basically repeats itself for 70% of the damage, but also it goes up to the target and up to 4 enemies, nearby enemies. Casting Touch of the Magi grants Lay Drinker. So basically, when we use Touch of the Magi, which is this one here, it automatically gives us Lay Drinker. That basically means when you open a rotation, which will always use your Touch of Magi as the first thing, we get Lay Drinker automatically, and the first Arcane Blast you're casting is basically going to be doubled. So yeah. Whoosh. That was a lot. I mean, that was probably like a 30-minute talent talk, so that was a long, very tough. But I mean, that's just welcome to Arcane Mage. That is just, you basically need to understand all this, or else nothing makes sense. But yeah, let's move on to the rotation. So now we're going to talk about the rotation, which is, if you have seen my Elemental Shaman video or my Frost Death Knight video, you will see the rotation is very much just centralized about the single button rotation. You basically just use the single button rotation and you don't have to think about much else. Of course, you have all your CCs and survivability spells and defensives and all that, but the Arcane Mage is different. We actually have, even though we're using the single button rotation, we still have 2 abilities we actively need to use. So, when we start here, you can see the first thing you always do about 4 seconds before the tank pulls, you use Evocation. Basically, Evocation gives us the Siphon Storm passive ability here, which increases our intellect by 14%. Very nice. Now we use Evocation, we get 14% increased intellect. Very nice. Then we use Arcane Surge. It's basically going to use all our mana, deals a lot of damage, and basically is going to increase our spell damage by 35% and mana regeneration by 400%. Also, it summons the Phoenix, which keep casting spells using all my Sapphires. If you saw the talent section of this video, you know all that. So basically, we use first Evocation to get 40% of intellect. Then we use Arcane Surge to summon a Phoenix, basically from this one here, Arcane Phoenix. We basically summon a Phoenix, and also we deal a lot of damage. As you saw there, it basically critted for 700k damage. And also it gives us 35% increase in spell damage. And it gives a lot of mana regen, so we get all the mana back. So very nice again. Evocation for 40% intellect. Arcane Surge for 35% spell damage, and also summon a Phoenix. And then you just press 1. That's it. So 3, 2, spam 1. So that's basically it. Of course, you can also combine it with mirror image. Mirror image is basically just like, summoning 3 copies of you. So of course that would also like deal more damage. But maybe that would be like better to... I actually don't know when we should be using that, but we can test it again. So my Arcane Surge is ready in 10 seconds. But we should probably first use Evocation and then Mirror Images, because Mirror Images will just stand still. They're not going to attack. So basically, Evocation, Mirror Image, Arcane Surge, spam 1. And now you can see we just spam, 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 and do a lot of damage. Keep in mind, this character doesn't have the best gear. I know what the build, I know what I'm talking about, but I just don't have the best gear in this character here, so ignore the numbers. But yeah, so we can see now we have deal damage. Let's just see here. There we go. As you can see here, we basically have our Arcane Phoenix here doing most damage, which is quite insane. Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, we have the Laydrinker Echo, Touch of the Magi that basically exploded, Arcane Barrage, we had the Meteoroids, and Arcane Surge. And also we have the damage over time. So that's basically the opener. You use your Evocation, you use your Arcane Surge, and you spam 1. When you're gonna use your Mirror Image, that's kind of up to you. You can use it like when you're about to spam 1, because I felt like, it actually takes quite a long time to cast the Arcane Surge. So I felt like we wasted almost 3 seconds of Mirror Image standing still. So it's probably better to do like... It's probably better to do like this. 4, 3, and then 2, and then just spam 1. That would probably be the better rotation to run by. But that is basically your damage rotation. So whenever you can like use 4 and 3 together, you do 4, you do 3, then you do 2, and then you basically spam 1. Just spam 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Then on number 5 we have Counterspell. Basically whenever the boss, the mob, whatever you're targeting is casting a spell that you can interrupt, which is going to deal a lot of damage to the tank and so on, it's basically interrupting them and doing so they cannot cast that type of spell for 5 seconds. So like boom, interrupt. Then we have Shimmer, very important spell, because while you are actually casting, you can teleport around. You see that? I can actually teleport around while casting. So see, that's the thing, because we don't have many instant casting abilities at Arcane Mage, so every time you actually move around, you're wasting damage. That is why we have Shimmer, 2 charges of Shimmer, because it can basically teleport around. If, for example, you're casting a spell and the boss is trying to cast some fire under you, you can use Shimmer to get out like this, casting, Shimmer, away. And Arcane Missiles we can move with. Whenever Arcane Missiles come, you can move with it, and we can also move with Evocation because we have this talent tree here, this talent, which basically means that Arcane Missiles and Evocation can be used while moving. So when Arcane Missiles come, or you're using Evocation, you can actually move at the same time. Then we have our Prismatic Barrier, which is basically the shield that you need to keep up all the freaking time. What I wanted to test is actually, because I should probably have mentioned this as the first thing, but as you probably have noticed, I'm not using the normal single button system. I'm using the one where we are using this trick here called cast, no channeling, single button assistant. Because if you don't use this one here, it keeps breaking Arcane Missiles. It was also actually breaking shifting power, which we don't use because it's not very good for this rotation. But basically, it could technically crash your Arcane Missile when you used without that. So that's why I have this one on here. I have this one here, show tooltip, cast, no channeling, single button assistant. It keeps making sure that we're not breaking our channeling spells. What I want to test is that if we can actually technically throw in our barrier in there, because then we can try and make sure that it's all up all the time. Not everyone would like this, because of course sometimes you want to make control on when you actually are using your buff. But again, you should technically have it on you all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write like this. There we go. Show tooltip single button assistant cast. Let's see if it actually works. It does. And it didn't, because now none of my spell works. So we cannot do that. So we're not going to do that, since it's not actually going to use any more spells, so sad. So you got to be using your shield yourself. So now we know that, you got to be using your shield yourself. But I mean, it was a try, worthy a try. Basically, the shield has a 25% cooldown, so you just want to like spam it all the time, and it's on you for 1 minute, and it only has a 25-second cooldown. We also had your barrier cooldown recharges 30% faster while the shield persists. So basically, while you have your shield on, the cooldown actually goes faster. So yeah, so you will be able to cast your shield quite a lot. Then we also have Elder Time, again, as we talked about earlier. When you use it, you basically create like a spot in time of here. Then you take a lot of damage. For example, we can probably do it like this. I don't know if we actually get too far away. Like this, you can see we teleport back. So when you get far away, you use it, you teleport back. If I had taken a lot of damage from a boss and used it, I would get back to my HP. Like, you know, if I had like lost like 90% of my HP, and I used it, it would basically go back to where I had 100% HP. So it's kind of like, it's just like a survivability thing. But yeah. Then we also have invisibility, which is basically after 3 seconds, you become into invisibility. And then the longer time you're in here, it's going to like reduce how much threat you have, reducing threat each second. So most people, meta players, they are playing with greater invisibility because it basically makes you invisible like ASAP, and you're untargetable for 20 seconds, and it removes all threat, which can be a really big saver, I guess. If, for example, you're doing a lot of damage and the tank is losing aggro, then you could use it to like get out of aggro and so on. The problem with taking this one is that we have to say goodbye to 50% healing from Ice Block. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to have greater invisibility, or do you want to have 50% healing? You could also remove it, take greater invisibility, but then you're only going to have 25% healing from Ice Block, which is our Ice Cold spell. I just think most people, especially solo players, delve players, random dungeon players, would enjoy the bigger healing compared to the greater invisibility. So, but again, that's kind of like up to you. Then we had our Ice Cold. Again, basically, Ice Cold is reducing all damage by 70, and it's going to heal you for 50% of your health over the 7 seconds. So, and then of course you're going to have this one here, where you cannot cast Ice Cold again for the next 30 seconds. But you don't have to worry about that, because, yeah, it's basically has a 3-minute cooldown anyway. We also have Mass Barrier. Basically, it gives a barrier to you and all your teammates. And it's kind of like is it actually giving a based on? Yeah, it's basically just flat out 1 million. So everyone, you and 4 teammates, you saw that before, me and 4 team members, we are getting 1 million here, like a shield, which is fun because you can see here, it basically just said that I have healed 4 million. So the healer, he's going to be like, how did that mage heal? Then, as we talked about before, we have Counterspell, which is basically our interrupt spell for direct target. We also have Supernova and Blast Wave, which is also interrupting spells. So basically, Supernova is kind of like pushing the target up in the air and down. So for example, if you have like a lot of mobs here casting spells and you want to kind of interrupt them, you can use Supernova on the one in the middle, and then it basically says arcane damage to all enemies within 8 yards and knocking them up. And also the primary target will take 100% increased damage. So it's kind of like just like an AoE interrupt spell. It doesn't work on bosses, but it works on like trash mobs. We also have Blast Wave, which is basically doing the same, but instead of blasting them up, it blasting them like kind of like knocking them away, just like the Shaman's Lightning Storm, I think it's called. We also have Frost Nova. Of course, if you play Delve or solo content or something like that and you want to freeze enemies, then basically you can use to freeze them. And then, of course, the more damage you do to them, like then damage, an X amount of damage is going to break it, so they actually get out. We also have Cone of Cold, which is basically dealing a little damage, but it makes them slow. So it kind of just like makes them slow. You also have Polymorph, which of course is where you make like an entire, like you can like turn them up like a trash mob into a sheep 1 minute. We have Arcane Intellect, very important you use it because it actually is the one that gives us this pet that keeps damaging with us. So always use Arcane Intellect, and then it will stay on for 1 hour. And very lastly, we have Time Warp, which is basically Bloodlust Heurisma. So basically for 40 seconds, everyone in the party and raid is going to get 30% haste, and you cannot use it for 10 minutes again, because it's kind of like going to give you, you can see here, makes us bigger, gives us a lot of haste, like 30% haste, but we cannot have this effect on again for like the next 10 minutes. So even if you had a shaman in your group and he can use it, then it wouldn't work because you have to wait those 10 minutes. So yeah. But in raids, for example, when you reset bosses or stuff like that, it actually goes off, I'm pretty sure. So I think it does. I don't know, I can't remember. But yeah, so that's basically all the spells we have. Again, let's go through the rotation one more time, just for being sure. Evocation to get 40% intellect. Arcane Surge for getting 35% more spell damage. Use your mirror images, and then basically spam one. That's it. The rotation is automatically knowing when there is more than one target. For example, if I was down here and I kept like attacking, it automatically used to know to use Arcane Barrage when there's more than one. You can see like now, it keeps using Arcane Barrage because of the this one here, Arcane Soul. So it kind of knows when to use Arcane Explosion and Arcane Barrage and all this. So you don't have to worry about when it should be using AoE spells and when it should be using single target spells. But I guess recommendation is when there's a lot of mobs like this, you should probably get a bit close up, because else your Arcane Explosion is not working. And as you can see, it actually prefers using Arcane Explosion. So it's just like a tip of the day that Arcane Mages, they work well staying close, which is also why a lot of Arcane Mages, they like versatility, because it will make us a bit more tankier than other, because we have to get a bit more up front. So yeah. That was the rotation part. That's basically now, we have now talked about the intro, the stats, the talents, the rotation, and now we're going to do the 10-minute gameplay video. So let's jump into the gameplay video. Alright, so here we are. Time to test this build in a dungeon. Keep in mind my gear is still pretty sluggerish, so I don't expect the biggest, but let's see how it goes. So we got to take pulling. My biggest problem right now is going to be when he does pull all this, I don't have like a spell I could just spam. Also, he's not really attacking them, so I don't know. Now we could probably start spamming one. Yeah. Yeah, because we don't have like any, like I kind of want to try save our cooldowns for the bigger pull. Well, let's see if it actually knows. So now it's gonna use Arcane Barrage, Explosion. Arcane Barrage, Explosion, did okay. Now we can spam one again. And you can see it kind of wants to use Arcane Explosion whenever you're like close to the target, because it deals a lot of damage. Oh, nice, 2 million crit. But yeah, so far, just been pressing one. And of course I can also press one while moving, but I gotta be lucky that it actually has a spell for me that I can use while moving. Ouch. That was my cape. I'm trying to save my... I mean, I could have used my number 3, since my number 3 is actually dealing damage to all of them. It's kind of like a very strong AoE spell. So I think what we could have done better in the start, when we started with all the mobs, was using number 3 first. Because it would actually have done like a really great like burst on all of them. For example, now, use number 3. And then I did also use evocation. That was actually in the wrong order, but still. You can see how much damage it actually did, like 1.7 million damage, and then Arcane Barrage. Yeah, just all pretty nice. Of course, here it would have been very nice to actually have my number 4 and 3 before the boss starts, but now we just gotta be pressing 1 and see what happens. Okay, so far really strong damage. Of course the cape has done most of it. But still, well, even though my cape did most, but Arcane Blast getting close. Now it actually used twice spells that could be used while moving. Because the Arcane Barrage and the Arcane Missiles can be used while moving, which of course is very nice. We should also be nice to the healer and use Mass Barriers, for example, because it keeps like giving us, it keeps everyone shield, and it kind of like gives the healer like a break. Also, in the entire video I keep talking about keeping up your shield, and what did I do? I didn't even use my shield a single time. But now I do all the mistakes that you make sure you don't do. So now if the tank decides to do a big pull, I'm going to use my number 3 first. I'm going to use Evocation, because I have a feeling we're going to have a big... And then we're going to use my number 3. Big damage. And spam number 1. Yeah, look at that damage. That's what we like. So basically use number 4 before he pulled. Then number 3 on like all the mobs, you know, Arcane Surge. And there we go. Very nice. Yeah. Again, just pressing 1. Now I'm gonna save my mirror image since it has a cooldown on. It actually has like a cooldown on 2 minutes. We're gonna save it for boss because he's just right down there. Hopefully we can get 3 and 4 ready. Trying to get a bit closer so we can actually use Arcane Explosion. Okay, cooldown's not ready. That's annoying, but it is what it is. So we're just pressing 1. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, okay, yeah, look at that. Like, that's quite good damage. Like, I was pretty much number 1. The paladin, he was quite lucky because he got a lot of like attacks from the back. You can see here, like he got like a very strong attack from the back. But if he hadn't had that, I would have won like this one here, like big time. Again, that just shows how much this build actually can do damage-wise. The paladin we have here, yeah, he pretty much has the same shitty gear like me. We all shitty geared here. Now we have a boss very soon, so I'm gonna save up my gonna save my cooldowns. No, use shield. Don't pull, don't pull. Wait a me. It's not fair. Using Evocation just before we pull. Use my Arcane Surge. I wasn't close enough. And spam 1. So 4, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, because my number 2 is not ready. Boom. Ooh, did you see that damage? Very nice. Very, very, very nice. Overall, very happy, very, yeah. I'm actually quite satisfied with this build here. I know that this is going to be my longest build video ever. This is going to be a very, very long build video. But I hope you all appreciate it. We got through exactly how Arcane Mages kind of works with the single button rotation and a very cool opener as well. But yeah, that's it. Remember, if you want, in case you want my UI or talents for the Arcane Mage, you will find it on my Discord. Just go to the Discord, the link is in the description. And in there you will see there is a single button build section where it's called, where you can see there's like all the different builds. So in there will be one called Arcane Mage and whichever build you want to be using. But yeah, thank you so much for watching my 2-hour Arcane Mage guide. But I hope you all enjoyed it. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.